Hello and welcome to episode 67 of Glitch Report. My name is GnittWitt. Thank you so much for stopping by, saying hi, kicking it with me today on the stream live over at twitch.tv/GnittWitt. Thank you so much for checking out the audio version of this show, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want the podcast in a video form, but aren't here to witness it live, head on over to YouTube where it is there as well. All right. This is this is the last podcast before Halloween, so I just want to say happy Halloween to everybody, even those that don't celebrate. I recognize that people don't think Halloween is a real holiday. You don't get it off. It's not time and a half, overtime, double time, whatever, if you're working, but it's fun. It's also the only thing stopping us from seeing, Christmas advertisements and shit like that in, September or something like that, right? I recognize that basically back to school shopping season starts the moment those kids are out of school. And then, before August is even over, you start to see Halloween advertisements, Halloween candy, the abandoned stores that you might be aware of have been converted into Spirit Halloween stores. Without disclosing too much personal information, one of the places where I got my COVID-19 shot, my COVID-19 vaccine shot, was in an abandoned Best Buy. This is true. This is absolute fact. Why would I lie about something so stupid? So the place where I got my COVID-19 shot was an abandoned Best Buy, and you could just tell that it was, well, I mean, not abandoned. I mean, they cleared it out, but it used to be a Best Buy. Now the place that used to be a Best Buy, that used to be a place where you could go to get your COVID-19 shot, is now a Spirit Halloween store. So as far as I'm concerned, nature is just as prepared for Halloween as marketers and advertisement agencies and the big chocolate industry. I don't know where I'm necessarily going with this. I've eaten a lot of Halloween chocolate. I'm probably more Halloween chocolate than man at this point, but here we are talking about games, talking that shit as we often do. And there's a whole lot of stuff to talk about. I didn't even prepare properly for this podcast. Excuse me if I just quickly... Okay, here we go. So, Alan Wake 2 is out now. Well, it's actually out tomorrow. By the time you are watching the pre-recorded version of this podcast, Alan Wake 2 will be out. And that's fine. That's just the way I like it. Point is, Alan Wake 2's reviews are out today. Now they've been out since about 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time as of the recording of this. I believe Alan Wake 2 reviews have been out since about 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, but we have seen some changes here and there with the numbering. Nothing too crazy. It's not like, oh, an hour ago people loved it and now they hate it or anything like that. Alan Wake 2 currently has 46 reviews on opencritic.com with an 89 critic average, with 89% of all critics recommending it. So again, with something like OpenCritic, we're looking at basically high 8s to low 9 out of 10s for Alan Wake 2. And of the critics giving reviews, 89% of them have been positive. So let's kind of jump into it with some of the reviews. IGN, 9 out of 10, saying Alan Wake 2 is a superb survival horror sequel that makes the cult classic original seem like little more than a rough first draft by comparison. And if you want to know a little bit more about Alan Wake 1, I'm going to tell you about it later on in the show. But for now, we're talking Alan Wake 2. Josh West over at Games Radar Plus giving it a 5 out of 5, saying, whenever I thought I had a handle on where Alan Wake 2 was leading me, it upended my expectations. Now, one thing I'll mention, as I deal with the wonderful world of... no, I don't. Stop. I don't want to... There we go. There we go. The wonderful world of doing this live at Twitch is sometimes you have to handle people in the chat, so I apologize. Point is, you know, what did I say? 8s, high 8s, low 9s. But that's not all. Game Informer, giving it a 7.8 out of 10, saying for longtime Remedy fans and for those who want to see what happens next for Alan Wake, the sequel is a success, but making it to the end includes unnecessary hurdles. And I know some people have talked about how, like, hey, you know, Alan Wake 2 isn't the best action game on the market. It's not the best shooter available today. And I think that's fine. I think even the most casual survival horror game fans know that sometimes the gameplay isn't the thing. It's the atmosphere, it's the mood, it's the vibe, it's the writing, it's the story, it's the characters, it's the world. It's not necessarily the part where you get a sweet assault rifle and then gun down whatever the horrors are in that game the way you would in a Call of Duty or Uncharted or Gears of War or something like that. So I recognize that, you know, survival horror, as popular as things like Alan Wake 2 seems to be, and as popular as how Capcom has turned around the Resident Evil franchise, we're still looking at a potentially niche genre of games to some extent. And I recognize that, hey, sometimes the part where you play the game isn't the most exciting part. So with that said, let's take a look at some more reviews. GameSpot, 10 out of 10. Remedy delivers its greatest game to date by turning a long-awaited sequel into a uniquely meta multimedia multimedia masterpiece. A uniquely meta multimedia masterpiece. Going through some of the other reviews from websites that I've heard of. No offense to the other sites. But going through some of the other reviews again, you know, it looks like, you know, a positive release for Remedy. Did I think anything less going into Alan Wake 2? Not necessarily. It seemed like Alan Wake 2 was a big deal for them. They kind of made their case for why it took so long for Alan Wake 2 to come out. If you remember, Alan Wake 1 is an old ass video game by any stretch of the imagination. Alan Wake 1 originally came out in 2010. Took them 13 years to make a sequel. I mean, some games seem take even longer for sequels to come out, you know. And I'm not going to make comparisons. The first reference I was going to make was to Duke Nukem Forever, which is about the same length of time, but Duke Nukem Forever is a terrible video game, so my reference doesn't quite even matter. But you know, they were working on other games, right? No, not every game that Remedy has made up until now has been a banger. Quantum Theory, probably the best example of like a swing and a miss for the folks at Remedy. It is Quantum Theory, right? I'm not making this up. What the fuck was that game? Quantum Break. Quantum Break may be a swing and a miss. People fucking love Control, and people love that Alan Wake seems to have some sort of connections to Control. And of course, you know, Remedy wouldn't be Remedy if it wasn't for Max Payne 1 and 2. If you remember, Max Payne 3 made by Rockstar, not Remedy. So a certain je ne sais quoi was missing from Alan Wake, from Max Payne 3, but I also think Max Payne 3 is pretty good. It's like Man on Fire. Have you ever seen the movie Man on Fire? It's basically that, but the video game. And I think Max Payne 3 is an all right game. But of course, you know, Alan Wake 2 is not the only thing that Remedy has been cooking. They're talking about that Max Payne 1 and 2 remaster, remake, whatever it ends up being. So they're going to put those games together, which I think makes the most sense. And then, of course, we also have, you know, what's next for Control, right? I have been playing some Alan Wake 1. I just figured, you know what? Fuck it. The time is now to play Alan Wake 1 after all these years. And I think it has led me to the conclusion that I need to give Control a second chance, as much as I found Control to be a really difficult game to play live on Twitch, on YouTube, and stuff like that. I think if I'm a little more patient with something like Control and I just take my time with it, I think there's definitely something there to enjoy. And like I said, like, I'm very curious to see how the Remedy stuff ties together in the end. I don't know what their big master plan is with Alan Wake 2 and with Control 2 and whatever ends up happening, but it seems like for now, as a standalone thing, Alan Wake 2 probably something that fans of Alan Wake, the pre-existing fans of Alan Wake, are going to be very excited about. And for those that are maybe new to Alan Wake or new to Remedy, your mileage may vary, but it seems like overall a positive experience. I don't normally drink coffee on when recording the podcast these days. I don't, but I do. I need it today. I need it today. All right, let's get into news. We got a whole bunch of news. We're going to talk about a lot of Xbox news, as there tends to be. We do have some Sony news. We do have some Nintendo news. And then, we'll save that last news story for the end. But let's talk Ubisoft. Ubisoft continues to struggle with shipping video games that aren't called Assassin's Creed. We know this because Assassin's Creed Mirage just recently came out. And it seems like it's kind of the only game that Ubisoft is capable of releasing, because they delayed Tom Clancy's X Defiant. They have no signs of releasing Skull and Bones. And now it seems like they are delaying Star Wars Outlaws. You remember Star Wars Outlaws? It's the Star Wars game where it's Star Wars meets Grand Theft Auto. Kind of, right? The game was originally planned to release before March 2024, but it will now come out later. The publisher noted the delay in its financial report for the first half of the fiscal year, although it didn't specifically name the game. It's generally believed that it's referring to Star Wars Outlaws, which was, of course, officially revealed earlier this year. This is a Ubisoft statement that reads, "The overperformance in Q2 and the current positive momentum of Ubisoft's brands build confidence for the rest of the year. The company can therefore confirm its announced guidance of strong top-line growth and non-IFRS operate income of approximately 400 million euros, I believe that's euros, without releasing the other large game it had initially planned to launch during the last quarter of the current fiscal year," which is, it's total jargon, nightmare nonsense, but basically, hey, we think we're doing okay. We can probably delay this game. As they should. There is no room on this earth for a fucked up and bad Star Wars game, considering Star Wars Jedi Survivor was kind of a fucked up Star Wars game, at least at launch. Bad, it's open to interpretation. I didn't necessarily love that game, but maybe I should go back and play it again now that they fixed a lot of the technical issues with Star Wars Jedi Survivor. But the problem is that there's just no room for fucked up video games. We gotta stop. We gotta stop. And I'm not saying Ubisoft's necessarily guilty of this or anything like that, but I've been kind of sitting here thinking about this for the last couple of weeks. It is harder and harder to justify buying a new video game at launch. It really is. And I think none of that has to do with the price of games, at least for me personally, right? If I want to play Spider-Man 2 day one, and I know that it's a $90 game, and I want to be one of the first people to play it, I recognize that that's the price I got to pay. So I'm not here telling you games are too expensive or games or whatever. I think the problem is that games release in real fucked up, broken, half-finished ways. And sometimes, as we've seen in the case of City Skylines 2, Developers are very upfront about that, being like, hey, yo, this is a little rough around the edges, but we're putting it out anyways. Other times, developers like EA and Respawn have to put out apologies, saying, and that's not me picking on EA or Respawn, that's just an example because we're talking about Jedi Survivor, where they have to say, hey, it's not what we expected and things like that. So it becomes a little bit harder and harder to justify getting hyped for something like Star Wars Outlaws when we've only seen a little bit of it, and Ubisoft is in a state where they can't quite put out a lot of their games. And of course, reported back in May that Star Wars Outlaws was planning to release in 2024. Two sources told Kotaku that the game was scheduled for release during the company's current fiscal year ending in March 31st, 2024. However, they also cautioned that the target was likely too ambitious and that they expected the game's release to ultimately be pushed back to the following fiscal year ending in March 2025. So we're talking about a potential scenario where Star Wars Outlaws is delayed by a whole year, which back in the day seemed crazy that you would delay a game that's only a few months out in the grand scheme of things. What, like 6 months? Like we're November, December, January, February. So yeah, we're talking almost 6 months or so from release. And then they potentially delay it by a whole year. We also saw that with Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League. So it's becoming more and more common of a thing to have a game that's 6 months out get delayed by a whole year. But that seems to be the world in which we live in. But word around town is that the big game that was supposed to come out in March of next year, that will now come out sometime before March of 2025, around March of 2025, is Star Wars Outlaws. Xbox doing what they should have done a long ass time ago, but here we are. Maybe they were waiting for, the stars to align or whatever. I still think they should have done this a long time ago. Xbox is reorganizing its leadership with promotions for Sarah Bond and Matt Booty. Bond will become president of Xbox, while ZeniMax will now report to Matt Booty. There was a really handy, I don't have to look this up on twitter.com, Xbox leadership. There was a really handy, infograph that was going around that, here we go. All right. So let's just look at this infograph here. You can't see it because I'm not putting it on the screen, but basically now when we look at, the Xbox hierarchy, up at the top, Uncle Phil Spencer, number one with a bullet, CEO of Microsoft Gaming. Under him, we have Matt Booty, who is now the president of Game Content and Studios. Sarah Bond, who is the president of Xbox. Dave McCarthy, chief operations officer for Microsoft Gaming. Jarrett West, chief marketing officer for Microsoft Gaming. Amy Silverman, who is the chief consumer sales officer for Microsoft. And then we got big bad Bobby Kotick, who is chief executive officer for Activision Blizzard. Now, as we know, Bobby Kotick and his time in Microsoft is not long for this world, which I think to me means that whoever they replace Bobby Kotick with will probably still be in this kind of hierarchy. So I reported it from top to bottom. And then underneath Bobby Kotick, we have Jocelyn Main, chief of staff for Microsoft Gaming. And then we also have to the other branch of Microsoft, Cynthia Purley, Carrie Perez, Linda Norman, and Tim Stewart. But basically, it looks like, Sarah Bond and Matt Booty getting those promotions. And now it seems to me that Microsoft is kind of controlling Bethesda a little bit more, right? It's like the people, Bethesda reports to Matt Booty and Sarah Bond, who report to Phil Spencer. And that's what I mean when I say that, like, this probably should have been the way things were done a long time ago. It's not like they bought, ZeniMax and Bethesda yesterday. They bought Activision Blizzard yesterday. But maybe they were just waiting to see how things like Starfield were going to shape up, how things like Redfield were going to, Redfall, were going to turn out before they decided where things like the Bethesda leadership were going to, kind of fit in the Microsoft tree. It's more of a pyramid, but let's just refer to it as a tree. Trees are friendlier than pyramids. Not that I have anything against pyramids. That's just capitalism business for you, baby. But anyways, Bobby Kotick is, the CEO of Activision Blizzard and will continue to be until they get rid of him sometime next year. Xbox had a partner preview that happened yesterday, and the partner preview was kind of a, like a 30-minute live stream, like nothing too crazy. It wasn't like they had a bunch of talking heads out there. They didn't have a bunch of people out there, hyping the crowd or doing what we've seen, during Summer Games Fest and things like that. But the point is they showed off a bunch of games. I'm not going to talk about everything, but we will talk about what they saw. First and foremost, they showed off Like a Dragon: Infinite Wealth. Now, Like a Dragon is what we now refer to. We now refer to the Yakuza game series as the Like a Dragon series. And Like a Dragon: Infinite Wealth is the sequel to Yakuza Like a Dragon. I know it's fucking confusing, and I say that as someone who is not an expert in Like a Dragon or Yakuza. I'm not an expert in anything. Fuck, I don't know shit about shit. But what I do know is I just need to look at the Game Pass thing for just a moment. So Yakuza has always been referred to as Like a Dragon in Japan. All right, you're with me so far? There's Yakuza 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7 is called Yakuza Like a Dragon. And now it is going to be referred to as Like a Dragon going forward. You'll see that we have games like a Dragon Ishin, which is one of the spin-off games. You'll also see we have Like a Dragon, The Man Who Erased His Own Name. Whatever. But the next mainline Like a Dragon game is Like a Dragon: Infinite Wealth. And that is continuing on with the, kind of the series' sense of humor and the new RPG mechanics that they have introduced with Yakuza Like a Dragon. And one of the things that they've introduced is Animal Crossing. They have introduced a whole, tropical resort island management simulator in Like a Dragon: Infinite Wealth. So I'm assuming in Like a Dragon: Infinite Wealth, you're going to be doing your Yakuza crime shit. You're going to be figuring out the story in that game. But if you want to take a break from that story, you can go to the Dondoko Island getaway mode, where you can catch bugs and you can, collect resources, and you can upgrade the island, and you can craft items, and you can make friends, and you can go on adventures, and it's fucking crazy. I was watching this thing, and this one, it was the first thing that they showed, and it's the first thing I'm going to talk about because I was like, holy shit, do I need to get into the Yakuza games? I understand that the other Yakuza games don't have island management, crafting simulators and all, they don't have that stuff, because they've primarily been, relatively modern, urban, open world crime games. But man, watching that guy catch bugs, I was like, I want to catch bugs as a Yakuza. That's what I want to do. I want to be the Yakuza on vacation. And it seems like you can do just that in Like a Dragon: Infinite Wealth. That game is coming out on the 26th of January. That is soon. That is out Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, PC, PS4, and PS5. Now, this is an Xbox Partners program, so these are all third-party games. So a lot of these third-party games happen to be coming out on non-Xbox platforms. The other thing that really blew me away, besides catching bugs in Like a Dragon, they showed off a little bit more gameplay for Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater, the remake. That looks fucking gorgeous. Woo! I loved what I saw of that game, and I cannot wait to play it. I'm not even the biggest Metal Gear Solid 3 fan in the world, to be honest with you. I'm not the biggest fan of Metal Gear Solid 3, but everything they showed, sneaking around in the jungle as Big Boss, the aiming, the shooting, the stealth. I'm a big fan of what they're showing. I think it looks great. I hope that it controls as well as it looks. That's kind of my problem with some of the older Metal. Listen, maybe we'll do a Metal Gear podcast and I'll tell you how I feel about Metal Gear another day. But just for the record, I think some of the older Metal Gear games don't necessarily control and play super well. That's why, in my humble opinion, the best Metal Gear games are Metal Gear Solid 4 and Metal Gear Solid 5. And I would say that the best Metal Gear game is probably Metal Gear Solid 5, though from a story perspective, that game is borderline blasphemous if you ask some of the hardcore Metal Gear fans. But to me, I think 5 is the best game. And if we can go back to the way the story used to be in stuff like Metal Gear Solid 3, this Snake Eater remaster might be the best of both worlds for fans that are really there to play the stealth action and fans that are there to experience the crazy ass story. They showed off some more Alan Wake 2. They showed off Still Wakes the Deep, which is a horror first-person action game. Seems like you're mostly walking around looking at shit. It seems like kind of a walking around sort of game. But that seemed fine. Dungeons of Hinterberg looks really, really cool. Kind of a action RPG with Zelda influences to it. I was actually quite impressed from what it looked like. And if you're a fan of sad-looking animal games, Spirit of the North 2, that is going to be coming out on Xbox Series X and S, PS5, and PC. Spirit of the North 2, a really nice-looking, sad animal game. Oh, and I should mention, of course, Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater coming to Xbox Series X and S, PS5, and PC. Alan Wake, everything. Still Wakes the Deep is coming out on Xbox Series X and S, PS5, and PC. Dungeons of Hinterberg is only coming to Xbox Series X and S and Game Pass. Spirit of the North also coming to everything. And this game looks kind of neat. Manor Lords. If you want to do a city builder, but you want to do it in the olden days, Manor Lords seems like a city builder, village management sim coming to Game Pass, PC, and Steam April of next year. The problem with recording a podcast while drinking coffee is that the coffee gets cold sometimes, but that is okay. This is Nintendo's new tournament controller rules are a huge step back for accessibility, it's claimed. Now, I should mention that when I say I understand what Nintendo's doing, I'm specifically talking about the apathetic approach it has to its Smash Brothers tournament rules. But here we are. Nintendo's new community tournament guidelines have led to some backlash, not at least from the accessibility community, who have pointed out that what they believe is a glaring issue. Now, there's two things I want to address right out of the gate. One, I understand Nintendo's apathetic approach to a lot of its tournaments like Smash Brothers. That's the part I understand. I don't understand why they want to target people who have accessibility needs, who want to play games a certain way with certain controllers. That's the part I don't get. So when they fuck around with their, tournament esports rules, I'm like, I get it. They hate hardcore fans of their games. I don't understand why they would want to limit the ability to become a hardcore fan in the first place by fucking around with accessibility. So let's just get that out of the way. Here's what's going on. And as always, shout out to Video Games Chronicles. The new rules include measures such as a cap on 200 participants for in-person tournaments, banning the sale of goods, and banning of receiving compensation for third-party sponsors. See, this is the part where I'm like, Nintendo says, fuck them. While these have been subject to criticism online, however, another aspect of the rules may have more serious impact on a portion of the community. As highlighted by accessibility advocate Arivia on Twitter, Nintendo's new rules outlaw the use of third-party controllers, essentially excluding some players with accessibility needs who use their own custom control setups. As part of an FAQ on Nintendo's new community tournament guidelines, one question asks what could be considered a tournament that is illegal or could be viewed as offensive or otherwise inappropriate. Nintendo lists a number of potential infringements, including the use of game consoles, accessories, and software not licensed by Nintendo. In theory, this also means that any controller that has been modded can't be used during a tournament that isn't a stock licensed Nintendo controller. Now, if you don't remember, Nintendo is the only game console manufacturer that does not offer accessibility controllers. Microsoft offers an accessibility controller. Sony offers an accessibility controller. Now, the thing to note about accessibility controllers is that they are incredibly customizable. Usually you are kind of buying this platform, this base level of control, and then you are modifying it to your heart's content. And those accessibility controllers are often industry standard tech. They're not using proprietary tech, which means that third-party manufacturers can make official accessibility controller options for people with motor, with a variety of disabilities of any kind, right? Motor, cognitive, whatever, right? So Nintendo really sticking it to their fans by not only not offering anything resembling an accessibility controller, but also saying that you can't use whatever options, what limited options are available for our platform. And if you haven't already, go look up the Microsoft accessibility controller. Go look up the PlayStation controller. It's amazing. The shit that they're doing is absolutely amazing. And it is incredibly disappointing to see Nintendo take this stand. I understand the part where they're like, hey, we don't want you dirtbags, selling shit at these, amateur level tournaments or whatever. It's another thing to say, we don't think that you should be allowed to play our games if you can't use the controllers that we use. That's the part I find incredibly disappointing. The advocate on Twitter, Arivia said, if you are not familiar with game accessibility, this might not seem like a big deal, but the reason why it is because many disabled gamers, like myself, use third-party accessories to be able to game. This can be anything from controllers you can use with your feet, tools to make the game work with a straw you can blow into to move your character, all the way to 3D printed specialized equipment that lets you use a regular Joy-Con or Pro controller. Those, of course, being the official Nintendo Switch controllers. She added, I can somewhat understand Nintendo's need to protect their IP, but this is taking it so far that it'll exclude children, youth, and grown-ups that need accessibility to play games like everyone else. The modding of controllers for accessibility purposes have been gaining ground in recent years to the extent that both Microsoft and Sony have released their own accessible controllers. Nintendo does not like the hardcore crowd getting into esports for its games, and to that extent, I understand. I just don't understand why they would fuck with people's ability to participate in any level of tournament play without proper accessibility support. Hey, is this another episode of Glitch Report? I think it is. That means another round of layoffs in the game industries. PlayStation's Visual Arts appears to have suffered layoffs. Now, Visual Arts is a support studio from the looks of things, and they have supported a number of PlayStation's biggest franchises. Among them were former senior level designer Danielle Bellamere, who wrote, "Unfortunately, following a wave of layoffs last week was my last at PlayStation. While this is certainly not the news I was hoping for, I'm grateful to have had a chance to work amongst extremely talented colleagues on incredible projects, and I'm leaving with good memories of my time there." Bellamere is based in San Diego and is working on an unannounced project. It's unclear if if Daniel if he was based at PlayStation Visual Arts Groups or Sony San Diego. So there's Daniel Bellamere was either working at PlayStation Visual Arts Group or Sony San Diego. Sony San Diego, if you don't know, are the MLB people. What's Sony San Diego working on these days? I want to say they're the MLB The Show people. Yes. Yeah. No disrespect to the good folks at Sony San Diego, but they've been basically cranking out MLB The Show games since 2006 and not much else. Oh, they did Drawn to Death. Drawn to Death was fucking terrible. Again, no disrespect. Anyways, Sony San Diego, the MLB The Show people. But the Visual Arts Services Group was founded in 2007 with the goal of growing some of PlayStation's biggest franchises. Visual Arts Services Group was recently brought to prominence for its work on Last of Us Part 1, work that reportedly saw the game be brought in-house at the original studio Naughty Dog to finish the project. So maybe they weren't doing so hot. I don't know. Another former employee, Matt Barney, wrote, "Goodbye, PlayStation, Sony Interactive Entertainment. It's been real. For the past few months, I know this layoff wave was coming. I love PlayStation and I always will. I mean, I stayed when I had the chance to leave, so obviously." So it seems like, a support studio. It's not like this is necessarily a bigger studio like San Diego, like Santa Monica. Santa Monica, of course, being the God of War people. It's not like it's a big layoff to something like Naughty Dog. But yet another wave of layoffs across the game industry. And I'm so sick of reporting on it. Maybe there aren't enough projects for some of these support studios like PlayStation Visual Arts to work on. I don't know. Like, I thought Sony was making video games over there. And typically when you make video games, you need people to work on those games. And sometimes you have a small studio working on a small piece of the game, while the bigger studio tackles the larger aspects of the game. Or you're porting the game to PC, which means, hey, Naughty Dog worked on the game. Now we're going to have other people actually put the game out on PC, whatever the case may be. But incredibly disappointing to hear nonetheless. We have some sales news. We have sales news for both Microsoft and for Sony. Microsoft says Starfield's release was Game Pass's biggest ever new subscribers day. The Bethesda RPG powered a record Q1 for Microsoft's gaming business. The news was shared during Microsoft's latest earnings call for the Q1 period covering July to September, which includes the release of the much anticipated RPG. This is a quote from CEO Satya Nadella saying, "We released Starfield this quarter to broad acclaim. More than 11 million people have played the game to date. Nearly half of hours played have been on PC, and on launch day, we set a record for the most Game Pass subscriptions added on a single day ever." Starfield was the best-selling game in the US in September. The game was available on day one for Game Pass, incentivizing users to sign up for the subscription service, which means there are plenty of people who still bought the game and did not subscribe. And I don't understand. Like, what is it going to take these people? I'm not trying to be like the biggest advocate for PlayStation Plus or Game Pass or anything like that. But when you have a game like Starfield that is a $90 Canadian full price game at launch, if you have a PC or you have an Xbox, what are you doing buying the game? What are you doing buying the game? No, seriously, tell me, what are you doing? Do you think that you're going to like make a little bit of money or save a little bit of money by buying the game and then selling it? Like selling it once you're done? It's like, okay, I paid $90 for it. I played it for a month or two, and now I'm going to sell it for, $60 on Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace. I'm going to trade it in at the GameStop or whatever. Do you really think you're saving that much money by doing it, considering you could have paid $10 or $11 for Game Pass? Because here's the thing. Even if you paid $10, $20 for Game Pass for a month or two and then canceled, I feel like that's a much cheaper initial investment than spending $90 on Starfield up front. Now, obviously, PlayStation Plus doesn't necessarily have those offerings. They might get there. And there have been some games that have launched day one on PlayStation Plus. Probably the most recent example being Sea of Stars, which is not a full price game, but I digress. What are you doing? What are you doing buying that game day one? Now this is where I'm guilty of spending money. In addition to the full price version of the game, many players also purchased the deluxe edition upgrade for Starfield, which allowed them to play the game a few days earlier before it entered Xbox Game Pass. That's what I did. I gave them money to play the game early, which also gave me the DLC expansion whenever that DLC comes out. And I'm going to tell you right now. So I did that for Forza Motorsport. I gave them their early access plus give me all the additional content that gets released over time money. So I did that for Starfield and I did that for Forza Motorsport. And I think going back to this feeling that a lot of games aren't necessarily worth buying day one, not because of the price tag, but because of the stability and the state that they are in. And the fact that games get updated all the time, right? Spider-Man 2, which is getting huge review scores and all that stuff. That game will be better in 6 months. It will be cheaper in 6 months, but again, I'm not trying to talk price. I'm just trying to talk quality and stability of the game. Right? So, I don't know if I'm going to keep spending the extra money to get the early access plus the additional content. Don't get me wrong. I have gotten, if we look at this from the perspective of I've spent, I don't know, the cost of Game Pass plus the cost of the early access. Let's say I'm basically $60 in the hole for Starfield because I spent $40 something bucks on the early access plus the DLC. Again, the DLC is not out yet. The DLC is coming soon. I'm assuming that DLC is going to be substantial, but the point is let's say I'm $60 in the hole for Starfield. All right. If we look at hours played for Starfield, and I really shouldn't be doing this because I'm not a big believer in the dollars to money spent ratio. I think at the end of the day, if the game is good, the game is good, right? But let's take a look here. I've put almost 150 hours into Starfield. So 150 hours, factored in that I spent maybe, $60 between my subscription to Game Pass, and my early access expansion. I feel like I've gotten my money's worth. I've also, for the most part, enjoyed my time with Starfield. It's not like the greatest game I played this year. It's not my game of the year. It's too early to talk game of the year. It might not be, Starfield might not be my game of the year. But the point is that if I hadn't spent that money, I probably would have enjoyed it all the same, which means that I'm financially irresponsible. But it also means that if I had waited, a few months, what if I were to get into that game, Starfield in November? Would it be that much better of a game? I don't know. But the point is that it's harder and harder to justify getting into games day one, knowing that in 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, 12 months, 18 months, they're going to continue to be updated. and the bugs and issues that they have will continue to be smoothed out. Now, in fairness, if we go back and pick on Spider-Man for a moment, like, it got really good review scores. Like, the problems that people have with Spider-Man 2 don't seem to be the part where the graphics are bad or the game is buggy or whatever. It's just like design stuff that either hits for people or it doesn't. And I know this is supposed to be a news story about Microsoft's numbers, but again, what are people doing buying Starfield when they could have gotten it on Game Pass? If we go back to talking about the news at hand, according to Microsoft, Starfield was primarily responsible for growth in Xbox Game Pass and first-party content, which saw its revenue grow 9%. Now, I don't know if they talked about it. Oh yeah, Microsoft said revenue from Xbox content and services, which is by far the division's biggest money generator, was up 13% year over year, driven by the growth in Xbox Game Pass. Now, I don't know if they talk about it here, but hardware for Xbox is still down. The people are still slowly buying Xboxes. They are not buying Xboxes at the rate that, Microsoft maybe initially intended. But in fairness, Microsoft just wants you to get Game Pass, right? If you have a PC already, upgrade your PC, get whatever, slap a new graphics card in there and go. And you don't necessarily need to buy a Xbox to play stuff like Starfield, and maybe that explains why their hardware sales is down. Now let's talk Sony. Sony says that Spider-Man 2 is the fastest selling PlayStation Studios game in history. The game sold through 2.5 million copies in its first 24 hours. Now, I'm pulling this up because I really wish, I've talked about it before, I'll talk about it again. I really wish that game sales numbers were reported the same way that like the box office is reported. And I know that even movie studios try to fudge the numbers, right? That's why the Super Mario Brothers movie came out on a Wednesday, so that they could say 5 days worth of sales or whatever. It's not, they're fucking with the numbers too, but they don't fuck with the numbers the same way that the game industry does. And it drives me fucking crazy. Let me explain why. Steven Totilo, who I believe Totilo writes for Axios. He's an author of the Axios gaming newsletter and just, games journalist, pointed out something. And this is a tweet that I'm reading from Steven Totilo. He says, "It's impressive Spider-Man 2 sold 2.5 million copies in day one. Sony's fastest selling? Could be, but the standard changes. So here are the other times that Sony has said that this is the fastest selling exclusive. Marvel's Spider-Man, they claimed Marvel Spider-Man, the original game, was their fastest selling PlayStation exclusive. Their metric was 3.3 million units in 3 days. They also went on to say that The Last of Us Part 2 was their fastest selling PlayStation exclusive. The metric, Last of Us Part 2 sold 4 million units in 3 days. Then Sony goes on to say that God of War Ragnarok is their fastest selling PlayStation exclusive of all time. Their metric, that God of War Ragnarok sold 5.1 million copies in 5 days. You see what I'm saying, man? You see what I'm getting at? Like, I recognize that Last of Us Part 2 has sold more copies than Spider-Man 3 in its first 3 days of release. That I can understand. But if I do the math of 5.1 million divided by 5, is Last of Us Part 2 a better selling game over 3? I don't, like, you see what I'm saying? Like, this goes back to fucking Blizzard being like, oh, people have put 666 million hours into the game. Yeah, how many copies did you actually sell? Like, how much money did you make, at the, at sale? And how many copies did you sell? But instead we get these really vague numbers, right? And listen, I'm shitting on Sony, but Microsoft's guilty of it as well. Oh, the fastest selling, Game Pass day for Starfield. Okay, well, how many? Tell me, how many subscribers did you have before Starfield came out? How many subscribers do you have now? How many copies of Starfield did you sell to people who decided to buy it in the first place? I'm not saying that Starfield isn't a success. I'm not saying that Spider-Man 2 is a success. I'm not saying that Sony and Microsoft shouldn't be pounding their chests about how hyped their games are this year. But make it make sense. Make the math make sense. I am not a very smart man. I don't know math. I forget what BEDMAS even stands for. But if you can explain to me how the math actually works out, it is very fuzzy language, and I would love to know a little bit more about how the sales actually, get calculated. Bare minimum. Tell me what's going on. Speaking of what's going on, if you're not familiar, let me break it down for you. Speedrunning. Speedrunning is a particular way of playing video games where you try to play through a game as fast as possible. Now you might think, why would you do that? You only get one opportunity to play through the game. You only get, one chance to make a first impression. Why are you trying to get through a game as fast as possible? Now, I will explain this. And if you don't like it, I'm not saying you have to like it, but this is how speedrunning works. By the time someone is done speedrunning a game, they will have probably spent more time playing through the game than somebody who tried to spend, hours and hours 100%ing a game to 100% completion. Why? Because they need to learn everything about that game. Every frame of animation, every stone in a level, every jump, every sword attack, every swing, everything. They need to know how long the cutscenes are. They need to know everything about a game. And they do that by playing through the game multiple times, right? Trying to shave seconds off the clock. Now, in some cases, they're looking for things like bugs and glitches that they can exploit so that they can get through the game faster, right? Oh, if you enter this weird part of the level and backflip into this rock, it teleports you to the end of the level, and that would be a valid way of speed running, right? That's a valid way of saying, hey, I actually was able to shave 8 minutes off the runtime for this game because I found this exploit. And, often these exploits exist in older games, Super Nintendo, NES, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, that sort of thing, where the game probably wasn't patched and updated the way that we see games today. Say what you will about Alan Wake 2, probably going to receive multiple updates over the span of its time, but people may not be as chomping at the bit to speedrun Alan Wake the way they would original Mario or something like that. And it's just a different way of playing the game. It's just a different way of playing the game. Often these people are making YouTube videos. They're streaming live on Twitch. They're entering into tournaments of some kind, or in this case, they're doing things called Games Done Quick. Awesome Games Done Quick is a speed running event. They also raise money for charity as part of the process, and it's a huge event that happens every year, and you can go and watch it, on Twitch, on YouTube, whatever. And it's a bunch of people playing a bunch of different games, speed running them. This year, things are going to get a little different at Awesome Games Done Quick. A dog will speed run a original Nintendo game at the next Games Done Quick. Let me say that one more time for the people in the cheap seats. A dog will speed run a NES game at the next Games Done Quick. Peanut Butter, the Shiba Inu, has already finished the NES title Gyromite in 25 minutes. There's already proof out there that Peanut Butter, the Shiba Inu, can play the NES game Gyromite in 25 minutes. The question is, can this dog do it faster? We're going to find out at Games Done Quick. And you better believe I'm going to watch that. Now, Games Done Quick does things for good. The event has now raised more than $40 million for charities around the world since the founding in 2010, including for Doctors Without Borders, Prevent Cancer Foundation, the Malala Fund, Organization for Autism Research and Care. Awesome Games Done Quick 2023 took place in January, and by the end of the show, it had raised a total of $2,642,493 for the Prevent Cancer Foundation. More than 140 speedruns were shown over the course of the week, simply like a week-long event, ranging from well-known titles like Pokemon Legends Arceus and Dark Souls 2 to more obscure games such as Axe Battler for the Game Gear. So it's a huge, like, people are playing Tony Hawk, they're playing Mario, they're playing Zelda, they're playing fucking Resident Evil, they're playing whatever. They're playing like 140 different games typically shown at Games Done Quick. But now, Peanut Butter, the Shiba Inu, is stepping to the plate to play Gyromite for the NES. Now, Peanut Butter's owner uploaded a video of him speedrunning the game earlier this year using a special paddle controller. Unfortunately for Peanut Butter, Peanut Butter would not be allowed to participate in Nintendo tournaments because it is a special padded controller. The Shiba Inu Peanut Butter completed the game in 25 minutes and 29 seconds. The speedrunner JSR had commented, the JSR is a speedrunner himself, and JSR had to command his dog to press the correct buttons using treats in the video. Should I just watch this now? Sure. I'm just going to watch this video. Don't mind me. Okay, yeah, that dog's pressing that controller. Oh, who's a good boy? Okay, that's just the dog playing games. Oh, you know, Shiba Inus are pretty cute. My understanding is Shiba Inus can be pretty chatty dogs. Yeah, that's just a bunch of people playing there's a guy playing Mega Man. Okay, yep. All right. This is probably going to be like the hottest thing at Awesome Games Done Quick 2024, right? Like, everyone's going to be fucking losing their shit when this dog plays Gyromite. I didn't even know what Gyromite was. Okay, here's the video of him playing. Okay. Yep. He hit the green button. I wonder what other games dogs can play. I remember, like, what was it, like last year we talked about that dog video game console that I don't think ever came out. Okay, we're gonna turn this off. Yeah, yeah. All right. Anyways, dogs playing video games. Who would have thought? We're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we're gonna talk City Skylines 2, Forza Motorsport, Starfield, and Alan Wake 1. So stick around. We ain't going anywhere. Welcome back to Glitch Report. Let's talk City Skylines 2. City Skylines is the follow-up to the 2015 city builder urban planning management game City Skylines. And when City Skylines 2 was first announced, I was pretty excited. I was like, you know what? If this is going to be a nicer looking game, if this is going to be a bigger, bolder, more ambitious game, I'm all for it. Sign me up. I never played a lot of the additional content and expansions that they put out for City Skylines 1, but I put about 30 hours into that game, and I really enjoyed it. I thought City Skylines 1 was pretty good, and I felt like it kind of took the Sim City formula and ran with it to the point where I really feel like City Skylines has completely eaten SimCity's lunch. Like, I just don't see a world in which a new SimCity could come out and justify its existence in a world in which City Skylines is already out there doing its thing. But that's beyond the point. The point is that City Skylines 2 is out now, and before it launched, the developers at Paradox Interactive and things like that were like, hey, this game's a little rough around the edges. Specifically, the graphical performance of this game isn't great. Even if you have a really powerful PC, it might not run and look amazing. Oh, and we're also delaying the console version of the game. Okay, fine, fair enough. At least they're upfront about it. So I fired it up, and it kind of defaulted my graphics settings to high, and I figured I'm not going to fuck with it. I'll just play it. So I played it. And as excited as I was to play City Skylines 2, I struggle to find a lot that City Skylines 2 does better or differently enough to justify its existence. And I know that sounds harsh, but that's kind of where I'm at with City Skylines 2. I'm not saying it's bad, and I'm not saying it is a complete carbon copy ripoff of City Skylines 1. For example, they've made managing things like plumbing and sewage and waste and water, they've changed the way that works. And in my humble opinion, they've just overcomplicated it. In some ways, they've simplified it, where basically when you're zoning for anything, whether you're zoning for residential or industrial or whatever, like as those buildings, start to form, the sewage management system just kind of connects. Like one building connects to another, connects to another, connects to another. And then you have to basically line it up with your sewage waste. You want to make sure that where you dump your sewage is not floating into the stream where you get your fresh water from, or perhaps you're getting groundwater instead, in which case dump that shitty water in the ocean. Who fucking cares? Dump it into clean, water. Who fucking cares? But they've meant that you now need to manage the piping for both the fresh water and the sewage water, which is not something you needed to do in City Skylines. It was all just one pipe that just carried everything. And they do give you the option to draw out the two pipes together in one kind of parallel direction, or you can manage both the sewage and the water separately. I just found it to be a little unnecessary because it took me forever to figure out what the hell I was trying to do. My town was just overflowing with shit for the longest time. It was just a goddamn nightmare because I couldn't figure out how to draw the lines from my waste disposal to the rest of the water system in City Skylines. I eventually figured out that you basically want to, there's like these pre-existing nodes that you need to click on wherever your pipes are and then draw the line there. I figured I could just draw the lines and then reconnect it on my own, but it seems like no, you need to click on this like kind of locked in placement for where your system currently is and then draw the line, which makes it feel a little rigid, unfortunately. They've also changed the way roads work. Roads are now far more customizable in terms of elevation. If you want to make tunnels, if you want to make overpasses, things like that. Which I haven't gotten too into because I am maybe not that ambitious of a city builder. I'm just kind of making grids. I'm just, which speaking of which, they've made designing roads in a grid-like form super easy. Like basically, you just draw how you just, I don't know how to say it. You don't have to draw the roads individually. You can just, say, I want this parallel lines that are this far apart for roads. I want 4 lanes, 2 directions each. I want whatever, 5 lanes, 1 direction, however you want it. And, they've made stuff like the roads a little bit easier. So on one hand, I'm like, well, at least they've made building urban sprawling grids of roads a lot easier, even if they've overcomplicated the sewage system. I also feel like they've maybe overcomplicated the electricity and power management system as well. In City Skylines, just like with water, you have a lot of different sources for energy. Do you want to burn coal? Do you want to do wind? Do you want to do nuclear? Do you want to do whatever, right? Now, the way that the game works is that when you start a city, you do have to play enough of a city to unlock those more upgraded options. So at the start of you building the city, you can basically use wind turbines or you can use coal. And they say, hey, if you use coal, it's going to pollute it's going to pollute some of the area. So you might not want to have, your residential next to the coal. Or speaking of like polluting the ground, this is also in City Skylines 1, like if you're going to use a waste disposal facility for recycling or for garbage, you're probably not going to want to have a bunch of people living around the garbage dump. You might instead want to populate it with other industrial areas or whatever the case may be. So in that sense, like definitely scratching the itch of, oh, I want to have my urban area here. I want to have my industrial area here. I want to have my commercial area here. And then of course you're kind of the need for office space, not the movie, the need for industrial areas, the need for residential and low income housing, high density, medium freestanding houses, whatever. That stuff is all going to change as you continue to develop the city. So in that case, it really scratches the itch. But between a few, they've also changed the way you like upgrade, various roads. Like, oh, now these roads are better. You can now recycle more efficiently your waste. You can now add additional wings to your hospital without necessarily needing to rebuild this hospital entirety. Like, they have some fun ways of mixing things up and feeling like you're truly progressing and upgrading the city. But at the end of the day, like, yo, dog, this is just City Skylines all over again. And I'm playing it on Game Pass, and I'm glad I played it on Game Pass. I'm not spending money on the game. But for people who maybe haven't played a city builder in a while, maybe they're better off just getting City Skylines 1, because I bet you can get City Skylines 1 for pretty cheap these days. Wait for it to go on sale, and I bet they'll even do something where they bundle all the additional shit that they sold in City Skylines 1 as well. Like, if I look at Steam for the shit that they've added to City Skylines 1 for you to purchase over the years, it's like, where's the pricing for this shit? You know, I'll just click on this, and then I'll click on this, and then I'll see what they're offering. It's like, oh, do you want, do you want the ability to have more harbors? Do you want to focus on like oceanfront property? Great. You can buy this expansion for, $20 or whatever, and you'll get all this additional shit. Do you want to focus on the nightlife and make your, place a little more tropical and things like that? Like, you can do that stuff if you want. And, like I said, if you buy City Skylines, right now, it's probably on the cheaper side of things, and you can probably get a bunch of DLC for cheap as well. But if you want to just jump in with City Skylines 2, like, I don't necessarily think it's that rough around the edges. Like, I might have a powerful PC, so your results may vary, and who knows how the console versions for those games are going to shape up. They did delay those games. But City Skylines 2 seems okay. Like, again, it's maybe harsh for me to say it doesn't quite justify its existence. But for what is there, I think it's all right. I'm only about 2 hours in. I'm going to keep noodling with it. And when I played City Skylines 1, I definitely did things where, like, I earned all of the upgrades that I could get by playing through one city, and then I restarted and made a new city, and the upgrades that I had that I was allowed to use from the start. So kind of the way that City Skylines 2 works is like, oh, you will earn these upgrades and unlocks, and you can apply them to your current game, or you can start a new game with those unlocks already there if you want. So it definitely seems like, I'm going to be poking at, if I keep playing City Skylines 2, there's a lot there to unlock and earn. Like, I just earned this unlock that's like the Rockstar's mansion. I can put this like rare house in an area, and it basically increases the property value and the happiness for everyone in that area. And I can only apply one Rockstar mansion to that area. But it also means now that if I were to start a new game, I could immediately get that Rockstar mansion and drop it into a location if I can afford it. You're managing taxes, you're managing budgets for your city. How much do the police get? How much do the teachers get? How much money do you want to spend? Oh, if you recycle, it's actually more expensive to recycle than it is to just burn and incinerate all your garbage. So, there is that and stuff like that. So anyways, the more I talk about it, the more I'm excited to go back and play it. But City Skylines 2 is more of the same. That being said, I bet if I were to really get into it, I would, City Skylines, just like with The Sims and other stuff like that, it's very easy for you to sit down one morning with a cup of coffee and whoops, I just spent the entire day playing that game. It's almost like you could end up being the city builder that never sleeps. Let's talk Forza Motorsport. I've kind of turned on that game in a way. I like Forza Motorsport for the most part, but it is pretty dry. It is just race after race after race after leveling up your car after leveling up your car, and there's not a lot of content there. Like, I've probably raced on every track in that game so far, and it's not like they're adding new tracks at the moment. And yeah, I have a zillion cars that I could upgrade and level up, but like, to what end? To what end am I doing a lot of this stuff? So I feel like for me with Forza Motorsport, there are a lot of different championship races that I still have to do in the career mode. And those championship races, while they all feature similar tracks to what I've already raced, they're all the same tracks. The changes are usually around car restrictions, like, oh, you can only use high performance sports cars. You can only use, retro hatchbacks. You can only use muscle cars. You can only use classic muscle cars, and each one kind of tailored for that type of car and that type of racing experience. But that's all you're doing. And I will say, as much as I liked the idea of practicing in the races ahead of time, I don't think it's quite as exciting as just doing a qualifying race. So the way that the practice works is that you'll fire up a race, and before the race starts, you have to do like 3 laps of a race. And what they're doing is they are collecting data based on how well you do each lap. And when you finish it, you'll get, additional, car experience to level up your car just by participating in the practice. But it also will say, hey, this was your best time. Based on the computer opponents, this is how well we think you'll do. So if you choose to start your podium race in 5th, we think that you could probably catch up to the second, second place. Or if you start in at 26, we think you might get, 3rd or whatever the case may be. Again, based on your time. But at the end of the day, like, if you just are good at driving, even if you didn't practice on that track that much, you can probably still do okay in the races, and you'll earn the money all the same, because the money that you earn is based on where you start in the position on the grid and how far you get. So if you go into a race completely blind, because they don't tell you this, but if you start the practice and you go into the pause menu immediately, even if you don't do a single lap out of the 3 recommended laps, if you pause it and you go to exit race, it looks like you're going to cancel the whole thing. But if you click exit race, it says skip practice. And then it's like, are you sure you want to skip practice? I'm like, yes, I've had enough of this. Let me just skip the practice. So if you skip practice and then do well in the race, you earn the same amount of money anyways. You just don't spend as much time leveling up your car, which, I don't know. I leveled up one car to 50. I leveled it to the maximum level, and I don't know how much more I'm going to level it, but whatever. So anyways, I feel like if I skip some of the practice mode races in Forza Motorsport, I might be able to more quickly bang out a lot of these career races, and we'll see. And speaking of banging things out, Starfield. I really am at the point now in Starfield where I just want to clean up a lot of the side quests and side stories, and I don't think I'm going to play through that game a second time to full completion. I think I'm most likely going to, clean up a lot of the side stories I didn't see the first time I was playing through that game, and I think that's going to be it. Listen, I put almost 150 hours in. You can't say I didn't play the game, all right? You can't say, like, oh, GnittWitt, like, barely scratched the surface. The problem with Starfield is that there's a lot of surface to scratch, and the more you scratch, the more you realize that there's not much else there. Like, I made my ship. And now I spend a whole lot of time upgrading my ship and customizing my ship. And guess what? Because you're mostly fast traveling from planet to location on those said planets, you don't spend a lot of time in your spaceship. So you know what I realize? I spend all that time upgrading my spaceship only to realize I'm hardly going to spend any time actually in it, flying it around, things like that. Starfield is okay. But when GameSpot said it's an inch, it's a mile wide and an inch deep, I kind of see what they're saying now. And I haven't even gotten to the part where you like build your fortress and your outposts and all that stuff. Maybe I'll spend a bunch of time doing that. But why would I spend a bunch of time upgrading my outposts in Starfield when I could instead build my city in City Skylines? Also, for the record, in City Skylines, I know you're probably wondering, GnittWitt, what did you name your city in City Skylines? I named my city in City Skylines 2 Paradise City because I am a big fan of Burnout Paradise. So anyways, still picking at Motorsport, still picking at Starfield. And then last night, I just figured, you know what? The time is now. If not now, then when? It's been 13 years. How much longer am I going to wait? I decided to fire up Alan Wake 1. And my initial thought was, even if I don't get around to Alan Wake 2, at least I'll have an idea of what Alan Wake 1 is. And let me tell you what Alan Wake 1 is. From everything I've seen from the marketing for Alan Wake 2, Alan Wake 1 is significantly different than Alan Wake 2. And I'll tell you why. So Alan Wake 2 definitely seems to be going for a much more darker, brooding, sinister, wicked type of horror. Whereas I feel like with Alan Wake 1, it is going for more of a like made for TV, Outer Limits, Twilight Zone, kind of at times a little cheesy, at times a little corny type of horror. It feels like you're playing a TV show. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, don't get me wrong, because what Alan Wake 1 sets out to accomplish, I actually really appreciate. I really appreciate that they're trying to go for this, Stephen King is trapped in his own story and all the stuff that he's been writing. He now has to fight and he has to live the horrors that he's created. Like, it is very much that, right? And I don't know how much of Alan Wake 2 is about Alan Wake, how much of Alan Wake 2 is about Alan, kind of living the horrors of the horror novels that he writes, but that is very much what Alan Wake 1 is about. And in Alan Wake 1, you only play as Alan Wake. I know that in Alan Wake 2, you have the other character, the FBI lady who escapes me at the moment. The name escapes me at the moment. Something Anderson. Point is that Alan Wake 1 very much kind of feels like the Outer Limits, Twilight Zone. And for that, I say, even 13 years later, it managed to pull that stuff off quite nicely. It also, I would say, if you've ever seen it, has a little bit of that X-Files, a stank to it. It also has a little bit of that Twin Peaks vibe to it, very much like, oh, this guy arrives in this mysterious town in the Pacific Northwest, and oh, what's going to happen now? And so for that, I say Alan Wake 1 from a vibes and a presentation standpoint, it's all right. I think the story, I don't think it immediately grabs me, but I'm very curious to see how it turns out. There are just enough twists and turns, but again, it's almost in that like cliche TV presentation where you can see the cliches and you can see the twists coming from a mile away. It's never, I'm like, what? I can't believe they just did that to my boy Alan Wake. It's like, no. Like, I know I'm familiar enough with the source material and I'm familiar enough with the things that inspire Alan Wake 1 that I have a pretty good idea where things are going. It's just that in their execution, it is done well enough that I find it to be exciting and fresh and enjoyable, even if it isn't necessarily that original. From a graphic standpoint, I mean, it's an old game. My understanding is they have a remastered version of Alan Wake that's out on Epic Games and is all the Epic Games Store and is also out on like PlayStation 5 and Xbox. I'm playing the original PC version, so it looks It looks old. It's one of those things where the game has, of course, like, you're running around, you're in the game, you're playing it, and then it also has these pre-recorded cutscenes, and the cutscenes look worse than the in-game. Like when I'm actually running around playing as Alan Wake, it looks better than when we go jump to a cutscene. The other thing I should say about Alan Wake is that, again, of course, it's very influenced by TV movies of that horror genre. And without spoiling it, they have a pretty good parody of Twilight Zone in the game that is kind of like this collectible thing that you can watch. So if you want to watch a bunch of TV in Alan Wake, that's the game for you. I think I'm probably going to play through Alan Wake. I don't know if I'll play through the DLC. I know they also did a like an expansion story, like kind of a follow-up to Alan Wake 1 called Alan Wake's American Nightmare. I don't know too much about Alan Wake's American Nightmare. I know that it takes place after Alan Wake 1. It's kind of set in like this Arizona setting, but my plan right now is to probably, play through Alan Wake 1, play some more City Skylines, keep picking at Forza Motorsport, keep picking at Starfield. And then my thought is that if I finish Alan Wake 1, I'll probably go back and give Control a second chance. Again, my initial playthrough of Control was something that I streamed live on Twitch and played on YouTube. And I just found it to be a very difficult game to play in front of an audience, play in front of a crowd. When that game is really a game that you should play at your own pace, take it slow, read every note and diary left behind by the characters and things like that. So, and first of all, there's plenty of that stuff in Alan Wake 1. So if you want to read a bunch of clues and notes and audio logs, and if you want to listen to radio messages left by people and you want to watch their fake Twilight Zone, like there's a whole lot of that in Alan Wake 1. I should mention that the gameplay of Alan Wake 1, the shooting of Alan Wake 1, even if you had played it 13 years ago, it's not great. So the way that Alan Wake 1 works is it is a third-person shooter. You're aiming, you're firing, you're doing your Uncharted, your, Resident Evil, your Last of Us type shooting. There's no cover system, but the way that the enemies work in the game is that they are weak to light. Now, if you've played Alan Wake 1, you know how this works. And my understanding is that Alan Wake 2 has a lot of the same shooting mechanics in it. But the way Alan Wake 1 works is you have to basically soften up the enemies with your flashlight. So you have your left trigger, right trigger, right? Your right trigger shoots, your left trigger aims. So you have this flashlight, and the flashlight runs on batteries. So when you're just walking around the environment, aiming your flashlight at stuff, it doesn't use any battery. But when you aim the flashlight, like using the left trigger, it'll start to deplete the battery. Now, if you use up the battery, but you don't reload if you use up the battery, but you end the combat, the game is smart enough to at least recharge that battery. So you're not wasting a battery walking around in an environment. The only time you'd really need to use a battery to recharge the flashlight is in a combat scenario. So the way that it works is the enemies are weak to light. So if you flash the flashlight at them, they will eventually soften up to the point where they can take gunfire. So I'm in the game, I've used a shotgun and I've used a revolver. So you need to soften up the enemies with the flashlight, and then you need to shoot them, which makes it a little slow, a little tedious, but I'm playing it on like the easiest, like easy setting, and it's very doable. It's just not necessarily very exciting to be like, oh, I gotta aim the flashlight at the guy until he, until he becomes weak to gunfire. Then I need to shoot him. Like, it's not. I would have rather just shot the enemies, but I get it. Like, they had to do something. And light is a big mechanic in the game. When you walk under like a street light, or if you find a source of light, it'll just automatically heal you. So usually the checkpoints in the game are like these big beacons of light that you kind of walk into, and then it recharges your health and all that stuff. But like I said, if you're just walking around the environment using the flashlight, it won't use the battery. And if you can finish a combat encounter without needing to reload your battery, it will just recharge that flashlight for you, which is kind of nice. So you don't spend that much time rummaging around the environment looking for bullets and looking for batteries because, again, you're reloading the flashlight, you're reloading your guns. And those are the kind of the two resources that you're trying to manage. You know, we talk about survival horror where it's like, oh, do I have green herbs? Do I mix the green herbs with the red herbs? And do I put the gunpowder with the coconut and the lime in the coconut? Like, what am I doing? Right? Alan Wake, keep it simple, stupid. You're managing your batteries for your flashlight and you're managing your bullets, and that is it. And then, of course, the health kind of regenerates once you're out of combat or if you find yourself in front of a light source and things like that. So Alan Wake 1, maybe not the most exciting from a gameplay and combat experience, but and maybe not quite as exciting as what Alan Wake 2 presents itself as. But I'm enjoying my time with Alan Wake 1. I find it to be pretty inoffensive and kind of a breezy, very linear, breezy game to get through. I know that there is a lot of collectibles and side stuff you can find, but like just getting through the main story, I find to be a pretty breezy experience. And Alan's, Alan being this famous horror writer and him interacting with the characters in the game, like it's fun. Like it's some decent writing, it's a decent story. And I don't know. I feel like Alan Wake 1 and City Skylines are probably going to be the big things that I play through for the time being. Maybe I pick up I don't know, maybe Alan Wake 1 is going to blow me away and I need to play Alan Wake 2, but I don't think I would play out, like, knowing what I know about the connections that Control has with Alan Wake, I feel like I wouldn't start Alan Wake 2 until I finished Control, so maybe I don't even get around to Alan Wake 2 this year. I don't know. It seems like one of the, bigger games of the year. Something I shouldn't miss, but we shall see. And speaking of we shall see you all next week for more exciting video game news and coverage. I have been GnittWitt. You can find everything that I do over at my Linktree, linktree.com/GnittWitt, GnittWitt, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all of that. Very good stuff. I hope you have a happy gaming week. If you're picking up Starfield, if you're picking up any of the games we just talked about, City Skylines, Forza, Starfield, Alan Wake, Spider-Man 2, Super Mario Bros. Wonder looks wonderful. I still don't have my Switch. Maybe one day I'll get my Switch back and play that. But for now, there's more than enough games for me to play. I'm sure you have a ton of games that you need to get through as well. Maybe you're firing up games that are on PlayStation Plus and Game Pass and going through the backlog of older games and stuff like that. Whatever it is, I hope you have a happy, safe, sane Halloween. Try not to get diabetes or your foot blown off with a firework if you can avoid it. It'd be really bad if you had both, though getting one seems bad enough as it is. And that's going to do it for the podcast. I have been GnittWitt, and we will see you all next week. Take it easy.